Prism is a really cool site for compiling student analysis and showing it as one visual set of data. I'll show you what I mean by that at the end, but I want to show you how to make one of these. It's super, super easy. First, you've got to go to Prism. You've got to create an account. Creating an account is really, really easy. You literally just sign up with your email and a password. I'm going to put in mine. Go to create. I copy and pasted some excerpts from the Rubaiyat, which is a poem that I will be teaching soon. So here I'm going to put the Rubaiyat 1 through 6. Author is Omar Khayyam. Publication date 1120 ACE. It's in English. Description is take a look at the way Khayyam writes the stanzas. One of the things that we're focusing on when we look at the poem is he was a famous poet, but he was actually more famous for his math. So my students look at it at the point of view of what did he write that really shows that he did have a knowledge of science, and what did he write that shows he has more of an artistic soul. So identify his inspiration. So then I'm going to say everything that's blue is going to be science, everything that's red is going to be art, everything that's green is going to be both. Maybe talking about the sunset does talk about science, but maybe that also just talks about it's a beautiful sunset. I'm all about digital citizenship, so know the copyright. This is old enough that it's public domain now. And I'm going to create my Prism. If you don't want it to be listed, if you want this to be something private, then you can make it unlisted. And that way the person will need to see your link in order to access it. Otherwise, there's 600 pages of these that other people have made. So, create Prism. So now we have this. We've got our 3 things. We literally give this to our students. They will need to create an account, but you've already done that. It's very, very easy. And then they highlight accordingly. So, wake, for sun who scattered into flight the stars before him from the field of night. Driver's night with them from heaven and strikes the Sultan's tower with the shaft of nut. Okay, this to me seems very poetic. This seems very artsy. We're talking about how the sun is literally capturing a building in light. This, on the other hand, seems kind of scientific. So once students have finished, they go ahead and click Save Highlights. And then this will be a representation of what all students have done. Now in this video, I just made this. I'm the only one that's done anything. So I'm going to go show you one of my recent prisms, which is my students looked over Bon Jovi. So I'm not going to highlight, I'm going to visualize. So this is a compilation of 14 users who have contributed to this visualization. I had my students do this in groups, so that 14 users is actually about 28 to 32. And you can see it's color-coded with the majority. So for example, Gunna. So you can see here for Gunna that 50% thought that that was rhyme, alliteration, repetition, etc. It was clever writing. And I think that's because they said this whole line rhymed with the other line. On the other hand, some people thought that it was figurative. Now this was interesting. We had to talk about this in class, and this is one of the reasons I like this, is that I said, hey, you know, a good portion of you said that you thought this was figurative language. Why was that? A lot of them said that that seemed like it was an exaggeration. The I ain't gonna live forever. No one lives forever, so that seemed obvious. Which actually the rest of the class argued, right, so doesn't that mean it's literal and not figurative? It was a very good discussion, and I'm glad that we had it. As far as green word choice, most students pointed out that gonna made it a little more informal. This wasn't an academic prose. This was something that was more informal. So you can see that even though the majority went with red, there's a breakdown. You can see it another way. Font size visualization. What this does is it just pops. So almost every single student highlighted, "My heart is like an open highway." Partially because my class really likes similes, and so they find those really fast. If we're looking at clever writing, you can see that this is a lot of the rhymes and alliterations identified. Now and never, a lot of students got that alliteration. Denotation and word choice, silent prayer got a lot. Students said that was really interesting because aren't all prayers silent? Great discussions on that one. So honestly, this is a jumping off point. This is what I use before a discussion so that then we can look at the text as a class and really see what everybody thought. One of the flaws that has been pointed out by teachers is that you can't see what each group submitted. There's a few solutions to that. If you really want to know what a student submitted, then you want to go back to when they're highlighting. Before they submit, before they click Save Highlights, you'd ask them to take a screenshot and then email that to you. Or submit it to Dropbox or Google Classroom or whatever you use. Personally, as a teacher, I don't care what they highlight. I want the discussion. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm walking around the classroom, and that's why I have them with partners, talking to each other. Well, yeah, you could look at this as figurative language, but don't you think that it's actually more of a rhyme? Those are the discussions that I wanted them to have before we went into a whole class discussion. So the fact that I can't see individually what everybody did isn't an issue for me. Super briefly, because I didn't talk about this, if you think that something is both, and I'm just randomly, so I ain't gonna be just a face in the crowd. I think that that's figurative language because he is just a face in the crowd. And then gonna, I think, is informal. So you can highlight one thing twice. And if you make a mistake, there's this handy little eraser tool. So there it is. That's Prism. I really enjoy it. I do find it's a little difficult to browse specifically. There's no search. So, for example, I can't just go through and say, oh, I really want to do something from Shakespeare. Let me see what someone else came up with. But I can go through and say, hey, I'm teaching a story of the hour. What does this teacher want? So in this case, we're practicing annotations, I think. This reminds me of predictions, aha. Let's look just randomly. There's 600 pages of these. So you don't necessarily need to predict everything or create everything on your own. What do we have on Mr. Gore? You can see these vary. There's nonfiction. I saw some in Spanish. There's a wide variety of topics here. You could do it with connotation, forms of argument, the rhetorical triangle. You could maybe have students just highlight words they don't know before you read a text, and then you can pop that up. This is cumulative. So if I use this in block 5 and then I use this in my block 7, my block 7 students will be adding to what my block 5 students already did. If you want to do that differently, then you're going to have to upload the text 2 times. Once the Rubaiyat block 5, once the Rubaiyat block 7. But overall, I think this is a really great tool, and I'm really look forward to continue to using it in the classroom. If you end up doing something really cool, I'd love to hear about it. Please do share that.